Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, it's funny. I was trying to explain the idea of war to my 7-year-old nephew the other day. It's a long story.
Oh, that sounds like a fun conversation.
It was
Yeah.
something. But I found myself falling back on all the movie words, glory and fear and victory, all that really emotional, dramatic stuff.
It's the natural way to think about it. I mean, we're conditioned to see war as this huge, high-stakes drama.
Right. But then I started going through the research you sent for today, specifically this piece by Joshua Rovner on strategy and grand strategy. And he just opens with this reality check. He says the single most common emotion in war isn't terror or bravery.
It's bewilderment.
Bewilderment. It just stopped me in my tracks.
It's a really jarring thought, isn't it? You'd think when everything's on the line, life and death, survival, that you'd have this, laser focus. But Rovner's point is that for the people actually living it, the soldiers, the generals, even the leaders, it's mostly just confusion.
And that explains so much. It's why you see the winners looking around afterwards like, wait, why didn't this victory actually solve our problem?
And the losers wondering how on earth they messed it up so badly.
Exactly. And you're saying that confusion comes from mixing up two words that I, for one, definitely use as if they're the same thing. Strategy and grand strategy.
We all do. I mean, you hear it in business meetings all the time. What's the grand strategy for the Q3 marketing push?
I have literally sent that email.
And it's fine for that. But in the world we're talking about, national security, mistaking one for the other is...
Well, Rovner calls it a pathway to frustration. I think that's putting it mildly. It can be a pathway to absolute disaster.
Okay, so let's clear this up right now. Let's define our terms. If I'm a general on a battlefield, what am I thinking about?
You are thinking about strategy, pure and simple. Rovner defines strategy as a theory of victory.
A theory of victory. Okay. It's a linear concept, it asks. How do I use force to achieve my goal? Where do the tanks go? How much violence do we need to use? And, this is crucial, when do we stop? It's about winning the fight.
Got it. So if strategy is how to win the fight, what is grand strategy? Is it just a bigger fight?
Not quite. Grand strategy is a theory of security. It's so much broader. It's not about the shooting. It's about what comes after. It's about making your nation safe and prosperous over the long, long haul. It's about winning the peace.
Winning the peace.
Right. And it uses everything. Your military, yeah, but also your economy, your diplomats, your spies, your alliances. And it all rests on these huge assumptions about how the world works. Like, does spreading democracy actually make us safer? Or does trading with a rival make them less likely to attack?
Okay, hold on. I'm hitting wall here a little bit. If I have an amazing strategy and I crush the enemy army, I win the war, doesn't that automatically make me secure? Doesn't winning the war guarantee the peace?
And that is the logical trap. That is the exact dangerous assumption that gets nations into trouble. Because here's the absolute core of today's deep dive. You can have a perfect, brilliant strategy.
And a terrible grand strategy.
A catastrophic one. You can win the war and end up weaker, poorer, and in more danger than you were when you started.
Okay, that sounds like a paradox. I'm going to need a really concrete example.
The source material gives us the absolute perfect case study. We just have to flip our perspective on the American War of Independence. Forget the American side for a minute. Let's look at the two heavyweights in the room, France and Britain, around 1778.
Okay, I'm with you. France and Britain hate each other, as always.
Yeah.
France decides to back the American rebels to stick it to the British.
Exactly. Now let's look at France's performance. Strategically, they were fantastic. They had a theory of victory, and they executed it flawlessly. They coordinated with the Americans, which is incredibly hard to do, and they managed to use their navy and their land forces together to trap the main British army at Yorktown.
Forcing the surrender. Game, set, match.
Yeah.
France wins.
Strategically, yes, a total victory. They got their military objective, humiliated their rival. But now, let's zoom out to the grand strategy, the theory of security. What did that beautiful victory actually cost France?
I remember from history class they were pretty broke, but how bad was it?
It was fatal. I mean, to fund that war, to build that fleet, the French monarchy took on a level of debt that was just catastrophic. It triggered a complete financial meltdown.
Which leads
to the French Revolution. The price of bread goes through the roof. The people revolt, and the king, the same guy who approved the war, Louis XVI, he loses his head. The monarchy is gone. The entire state collapses.
That is just wild. So they win the war in America, and their reward is that their own government gets destroyed.
Precisely. A perfect strategic win, but an act of grand strategic suicide. Now let's flip the coin. Let's look at Britain.
The losers.
Strategically. A disaster. A total clown show. Their generals were bickering. They had no unified plan. They let the French Navy corner them. They got beaten fair and square.
So they should have been ruined.
Yeah. You'd think so. But look at what happened next. Rovner argues that losing those colonies was maybe the best thing that ever happened to them. A blessing in disguise.
How is losing a huge part of your empire a blessing?
Well, think about what they lost. A bunch of expensive, hard-to-defend territories full of angry people who didn't want to pay taxes. Losing forced them to pivot. It forced them to rethink everything. They stopped trying to be a land power in North America.
They cut their losses.
And they shifted their entire grand strategy. They adopted something we now call offshore balancing.
Offshore balancing? What's that?
Think of it this way. Instead of playing poker at the table and getting into fights, you decide to own the casino. You just secure the building, you control who comes in and out, and you take a small cut of every transaction. You let everyone else fight it out at the tables.
I love that analogy. So Britain just said, okay, you guys can have Europe, we'll take the oceans, and all the money.
That's basically it. They poured money into the Royal Navy, controlled global trade, and paid other European countries to do the fighting on the continent. And the result? Britain spends the next 100 years as the richest and most powerful nation on Earth. The Pax Britannica.
All because they lost a war.
Because the shock of losing forced them to fix their broken grand strategy.
Wow, okay, that is a heavy lesson. Sometimes taking an L is better for your long-term health than a W that costs you everything.
Right. And that leads to another historical pattern Rovner points out, one that feels, well, uncomfortably relevant today. He calls it the trap of hubris.
Hubris. Classic fatal flaw.
It's what happens when a great power gets bored of its own strengths. Rovner takes us all the way back to the Peloponnesian War. Athens versus Sparta.
The elephant and the whale.
Exactly. But think about their strengths, their lanes. Athens was a sea power, rich, commercial, amazing navy. Sparta was a land power. The best soldiers in the world, but very inward-looking, didn't like leaving home.
So as long as they stick to what they're good at, they're fine.
They're secure. But they got arrogant. Athens started to think it could win a land war. Sparta convinced itself it could build a fleet and beat Athens at sea.
They both tried to be something they weren't.
And it led to this horrible, grinding, decades-long war that bled them both dry. They destroyed their own security because they couldn't resist competing in domains where they were amateurs.
Okay, you can't tell me that story and not immediately make the leap to the United States and China today. It feels like the exact same setup.
It's the modern parallel, absolutely. The U.S. is the world's dominant maritime power.
Yeah.
We control the sea lanes. We have the alliances. China is the dominant land power in East Asia.
And are we staying in our lanes?
Not even close. Right now, both sides are pouring billions and billions of dollars into figuring out how to attack the other's weak point to avoid fighting strength on strength.
What does that actually look like? I mean, I'm always hearing about things like carrier killer missiles.
That's a perfect example. China is building missiles specifically to sink American aircraft carriers so they don't have to fight the whole U.S. Navy on the open ocean. Meanwhile, the U.S. is developing these small, mobile marine units with long-range missiles to threaten the Chinese mainland without a full-scale invasion.
It sounds like both sides are looking for a hack, a shortcut to victory.
That's the word Rovner uses. Novel strategic concepts. Both sides are dreaming of a short, sharp, decisive war. If we just take out their satellites, or if we just sink one of their carriers, the other guy will back down.
But war is never that clean.
Almost never. And this is the grand strategic risk. If you stumble into a war thinking it's going to be a quick, high-tech fight, and instead it becomes a long, bloody economic slog, you're stuck. You're stuck in a war that undermines your entire security model. Just like Athens and Sparta. You've let your fancy strategy hijack your grand strategy.
That whole idea of getting stuck, of fighting a war you can't figure out how to end, it just screams Vietnam. The common story there is that the U.S. military just fought the wrong type of war. They brought tanks to a knife fight.
Right, that's the standard critique. Bad strategy. But Rovner argues that's missing the point. The tactics weren't the real problem. The problem was that there was a complete vacuum where the grand strategy was supposed to be.
What do you mean by that? The goal was to stop communism, right?
In a bumper sticker sense, yes. But there was no coherent definition of victory. No one in Washington could agree on what a secure South Vietnam even looked like. When would we be done? What happens if the Saigon government is corrupt and unpopular? What if the costs become too high?
They didn't have answers to those questions.
They actively avoided them. And because the politicians couldn't agree on what the war was for, they gave the military these impossible self-contradictory orders. Go fight, but don't cross this line. Bomb them, but don't hit these targets.
It's like they're asking soldiers to solve a political problem with guns.
Precisely. And you see this same kind of disconnect, maybe even more clearly, when you look at the most dangerous weapons ever invented, nuclear weapons.
Oh, this section of the research was fascinating. The nuclear revolution.
It's such a great paradox. So for decades, academics have had this theory. They say nukes are so destructive, they're not really weapons anymore. You can't use them to win a war because you'll just end the world.
Mutually assured destruction. If I launch, you launch, we're all gone. So the only reason to have them is to deter other people from using them.
Right. Now, if that theory were really true, our grand strategy would reflect it. You'd only need a small number of nukes, just enough for deterrence. You wouldn't need thousands, and you wouldn't need to build them into tiny artillery shells for your army.
We did all of that.
We built tens of thousands. We put them on planes, in submarines, on trucks. Our grand strategy, all the planning and spending, was based on the idea that we could, theoretically, fight and win a limited nuclear war.
So our grand plan said, yes, we can use these.
But then look at the strategy. Look at what our leaders actually did in a crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Tense moments over Berlin. Every time we got to the brink, they pulled back, they were terrified.
It's like you spend a fortune on a suicide vest. You put it on, you talk really tough.
Yeah.
But when a fist fight actually breaks out, you can't throw a punch because the whole thing might go off.
That's a perfect analogy. You can't actually fight while wearing the vest. The leaders' actions, their real-time strategies, showed they believed the nuclear revolution was real. But their planning, their grand strategy, pretended it wasn't. It's a total disconnect.
And that disconnect didn't just vanish when the Cold War ended. We saw a new version of it pop up after 9/11.
Absolutely. The war on terror is a classic example of strategy and grand strategy starting in one place and being forced to evolve.
Because at the beginning, the goal was huge. It was victory with a capital V. Destroy al-Qaeda. End tyranny. These were massive, ambitious, grand strategic aims. But the strategy to achieve them was, well, how do you destroy an ideology? How do you use an army to defeat a network of guys with laptops scattered across a dozen countries?
You can't, really. Not in a conventional sense.
So, over 2 decades, you saw this slow, painful shift. We stopped talking about winning in that World War II way. We shifted to something Rovner compares to what the British called air policing back in the 1920s.
What does that mean?
It's basically risk management. Instead of sending a huge army, the British would use a few biplanes to bomb rebels in the Iraqi desert because it was cheap. We started using drones, special forces, and over-the-horizon strikes.
The whole mowing the lawn concept?
It's a grim phrase, but it's accurate. The grand strategy quietly shifted from transform the Middle East to manage the violence at a sustainable cost so it doesn't hit us at home. We accepted we couldn't eliminate the threat, so we decided to police it.
It's not as emotionally satisfying as a victory parade, but I guess it's more realistic. And it aligns the strategy with a more achievable grand strategy.
Okay, so looking ahead, we have to talk about the new stuff. AI, cyber, all the future of war tech.
The new domains. And Rovner points out this historical cycle that's so important to see because we were right in the middle of it again. He calls it the cycle of hope, fear, and resignation.
Okay, walk me through that.
Every time a new technology comes along, air power a century ago, space in the 60s, now AI and cyber, you get these prophets who pop up and say, this changes everything. This will make war short, clean, and decisive.
I hear that constantly about cyber attacks. We can shut down their power grid without firing a shot.
That's the hope. Then comes the fear, which is the flip side. Oh my God, if the enemy gets this technology before we do, we're finished.
It's a national security version of FOMO.
Exactly. But then eventually reality sets in. That's the resignation. We discover that actually using this new tech in the real world is incredibly messy and difficult because of what the military calls friction.
Friction? You mean like things just go wrong?
Things go wrong, software has bugs, bureaucracy slows everything down. Think about military AI. You need the world's best programmers. But those people can make a fortune at Google. They don't want a government salary to work in a classified bunker.
And the tech itself isn't perfect. I mean, my chatbot still makes things up. I don't want it aiming missiles.
Right. And in cyber, it's a constant cat and mouse game. You spend a year and millions of dollars on a brilliant piece of code to hack the enemy. You use it one time, And they patch the vulnerability. Your weapon is gone. It's not a rifle you can use for 50 years.
So any advantage you get is temporary.
It's fleeting. And the danger to bring it all back is that right now, the great powers are deep in that hope and fear phase. They are building their grand strategies around the fantasy that AI and cyber will make war easy.
If they're wrong.
Pre-war strategic assumptions often fall apart when the shooting starts. That's the quote. If your whole plan for security is built on a tech fantasy, and that fantasy pops on day one of a conflict, well, you're in a lot of trouble.
This has been, frankly, a little terrifying.
Yeah.
But it puts so much into perspective. It clarifies why just winning is never the whole story.
That's the ultimate lesson from all of this. You can have the most brilliant generals, the best soldiers, the most advanced weapons. You can win every single battle. But if your grand strategy, your basic theory about how to be safe in the world is wrong, then all those victories can actually lead you to ruin.
So winning the peace is a lot harder than winning the war.
It's infinitely harder. And I want to leave you and everyone listening with one last thought from the source material. It's a little provocative.
I'm ready.
We always think of military failure as a tragedy. And it is for the people involved. But on a national level, sometimes failure is necessary.
How can it be necessary?
Because constant success makes you lazy. It makes you complacent. When you keep winning, you start believing your own hype. You stop asking the hard questions about what you're really doing. But a big, shocking failure like Britain losing the American colonies, it forces a country to have a brutal, honest conversation with itself about what really provides security. It kills off all that military nostalgia.
It forces a reset.
Sometimes losing a war is the only thing that can save you.
Losing as a national wake-up call.
Oh.
I think that's a really powerful place to end. Thank you for this. This was an incredible deep dive into the logic of victory and defeat.
My pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us. The next time you hear someone talk about a strategic victory, maybe ask yourself, okay, but what's the grand strategy? What about the peace? Stay curious.